I had to turn down, many concerts on Friday nights. And when I was signed to a major record label, they found it very alarming. As a result, I was dropped. I went to Israel to go and study Torah, and I sort of turned my back on the music industry. My name is Alex Clare, and I am, amongst other things, a musician and a teacher and a father.
Can you describe your connection, if any, with Judaism growing up and throughout your teens?
My connection to Judaism growing up was very superficial, very minimal. In my teens, I started learning Hebrew. Sort of started edging towards, some level of observance as a teenager, and then rock and roll got in the way. That just stopped. Everything, there was like parties to be had.
So like no holidays, nothing?
No holidays, nothing.
Okay, so when did music become a career choice for you?
So being in London in the early 2000s, there was a very strong music scene. Of my peer group, there's a ridiculous amount of Grammys, probably 100 plus Grammys from my peer group. People like Adele, Florence and the Machine, Amy Winehouse, Bastille, Mumford & Sons. They were all playing on the same little scene in London in those days. So there was a really strong live music scene. The music industry, one of its hubs is London, and big record labels are based there. And there was just a lot of opportunities to play and to get out there. And I sort of moved to northwest London from southeast London, where I grew up, which was the center of the music scene. So just my social life, every aspect of my life was very much in that world of music. It started to kick off when I started. I was obviously a drummer, playing in different groups, and I was writing and playing guitar, and eventually I fused these two different genres of music, electronic EDM style music and soul music, put them together, and created this thing that got me noticed. Then got a publishing deal, got a development deal, then a record contract, and kind of just shot up from there.
There's a specific song that took you, right?
Yeah, there's a song called Too Close. That song that was the big one, yeah.
What initially attracted you to Jewish life and practice? And was there one incident that made you sure that this was the right direction for you?
So Tanakh, the Torah and the Vim Kusuvim, the Pentateuch, the prophets and the writings that are contained in what we call the Tanakh, what other people might call the Old Testament, found it fascinating. Found it so interesting, the stories and the, just in terms of historical document or just stories, they were just great. So I always had that interest. Don't know why, don't know where it came from, just thought it was cool. And then I started experiencing Shabbos, out of curiosity. I was asked to come to a friend's house for Shabbos, and they weren't what you'd call, completely observant, but English Jews tend to be slightly traditional. There's always something, more often than not. So I was invited for a Friday night meal and a Yom Tov meal by friends' houses, and slowly that connection to Shabbos and Yom Tov, the holidays and the Sabbath, those two things really helped create a warm feeling towards Yiddishkeit. I always had a belief in Hashem. I've always been a ma'amin. I never had any doubts or sfeikus or insecurities about the fact that there's a creator and director of this universe. And slowly but surely, I just started learning more, and gradually. There was one big moment that I've spoken about before, but it's worth speaking about again, because I'm sure there's lots of people who have never heard my story or probably never even seen my face, but it's a cool story. I was living in 2006 with a guitarist from a fairly well-known band, very successful young man, vintage Jaguars, classic guitars, guest list to every party in the world. And he broke down on me one day and told me how miserable he was. He was so unhappy. And when I asked him why he was unhappy, he just there's no reason to anything. Nothing I do has any purpose. And it really woke me up to realize that the world of materiality isn't going to give you happiness. It might give you some nice things. It might prevent unhappiness from poverty, but it's not going to give you a sense of purpose and joy. And people need to have a why in life. A why is so important. If you have a why, then all the hows and, whens just will click. So I decided I needed a real Shabbos experience, and I left Camden Town, where I was living at the time in northwest London, and went to Stamford Hill for Shabbos and just walked into a large Hasidic synagogue, and I was invited for a meal, and I never left. And that was that. So I decided, Shabbos, to be authentic, has to be kept according to halacha, according to Jewish law. And it's a very profound and very deep experience if you're invested intellectually and emotionally in it. So slowly, I, started growing and keeping Shabbos, and it snowballed to learning Torah and learning Hebrew, and then learning Aramaic, and really trying to develop an understanding of, scriptural sources and Talmudic sources, and just got very into it, very, very into it.
Was there ever a time that your career and your Jewish path that you were going on, was there any time that
many times where there was a conflict between my religious life and my professional life? Not so much for me, but for the people around me, having to accommodate my madness, as they would have put it at the time. That while I was becoming religiously observant, keeping the Sabbath, keeping kosher, and keeping halacha, Jewish law in general, might not be so conducive to the life of a touring musician. And it did cause quite a lot of conflict. I had to turn down, many concerts on Friday nights. And when I was signed to a major record label, they found that very alarming, to the point that they actually ended up firing me. I got dropped by my record label for for refusing to play on a Friday night or on religious holidays. And as a result, I was dropped. I went to Israel to go and study Torah, and I sort of turned my back on the music industry. And when I went to yeshiva, that's when, I really had my first huge international break. A song that I'd recorded called Too Close became a top 10 hit all over the world while I was studying in yeshiva, and was now a top 10 Billboard artist. So that gave me a little bit more, leverage power, that once I had broken into the market, I could now call the shots on my own, and it was no longer as challenging to be a religiously observant person and a professional musician. The two could exist together.
Can you talk a little bit about what it was like when you were turned down, how you?
It was very hard. So I turned down so many different opportunities and concerts that the climax of this whole incident with my record label was that it was Motzei Yom Kippur in 2011, and they called me up to tell me I'd been offered a concert for the BBC, going live. And the best thing was, it wasn't on a Friday night, it was on a Thursday night. So that's amazing. This is a Motzei Shabbat, it's a Saturday night, Yom Kippur. And I said to them, which Thursday? And they said, well, it's actually next Thursday. To which I said, oh, that's the Jewish holiday of Sukkot. And the Jewish holiday of Sukkot has many rules, like the Sabbath, and we can't work on Sukkot. And they told me, yes, we know that. We've looked into it. But we have to tell you, if you don't do the concert, we're going to have to, let you go. And I didn't think they would, but they did. They fired me. And it was a very hard few months. And, and what was more complicated was that when you sign a record deal, they give you a lot of money to make an album. You get sent all over the world. But, international flights, studio time, hotels, even if you're going to do it conservatively, it's going to cost quite a lot of money to do. So I had no money left from my record deal. What was worse was that in my contract, it stipulated that if I got fired from the record label, my band, who were on a sort of retainer to me, to the record label, if I got dropped, any money that was owed to them over the previous financial quarter, I would have to pay. So this was, October, and the band didn't get paid. And now I owed them £11,000. So the little money I did have now became well into the minus figures, because I now owed, 4 people I would play with £11,000, which is, it's nowadays it's, not a small amount of money. But back then it was equivalent to about $22,000. It was really hard. I went to my rabbi and I sort of complained about my life. So, this is really hard. I've chosen Shabbos. I want to live a life of Kedusha and being connected to Hashem. But it seems like it's really backfired. It's very, very challenging. And he said, you're a little bit like Abraham. You're a little bit like Abraham. So I said, oh, okay, very nice. Please tell me more. And he said, Abraham was given 10 challenges. And the penultimate challenge was a Akedas Yitzchak, where he was told to sacrifice his son. Now, to add a bit of context to the story, Abraham waited 99 years to have a son. And after having a son, after 37 years, being told to sacrifice him, after investing absolutely everything in him, Abraham was, of course, willing to do it. Which, to our Western modern sentiment might seem like a crazy idea, but Abraham was talking, face to face with the created universe, and it was definitely a challenge. It was definitely very, very hard for Abraham. But my rabbi said, because of that decision of Abraham's willingness to sacrifice the one thing that was more important to him than anything else, we are all here. Every single Jewish person that's existed from that point until this is alive in the merit of Abraham's decision to sacrifice his son. And he said, Alex, I promise you, if you're willing to sacrifice the most important thing to you, which is your career, you will see siyata d'shemaya, you'll see help from heaven. So I said, all right, thank you very much, Rabbi. That's great. It's a nice story. I feel very warm, but I can't pay my bills. I've got no record contract and I owe my band £11,000. And I have no way of if I don't have my band, I can't play concerts, I can't make money. It's a really bad situation. He said, no, nevertheless, I promise you'll see siyata d'shemaya. Okay. The next day, I'm sitting in a cafe in Golders Green and I get a phone call from a promoter in Berlin who says that there's a concert the next day in Germany and there was a band who was supposed to play at some big corporate event and they've had to pull out because the lead singer had laryngitis. So would you come and play? And I said, I can't, I don't have a band right now. And they said, well, we've got £11,000 for you. Would that be okay? So I said, give me a minute. So I phoned my band and I said, guys, you're not going to believe this. This is wild. I've been offered a gig tomorrow in Germany and I've got to tell you, I can't pay you. If you play the show with me, I can't pay you for the show. But if you play the show, I can cover all the debts that I owe to you and we'll be good. Up until a certain point, you'll have the money for all the shows I played, but I just need you to do this, favor for me. And they agreed, thank God. And we flew to Germany, did the concert, and within 24 hours, my debt to my band of £11,000 was cleared. It was amazing. It's a big bracha. I'm I don't really know what to do, so I decided to go to yeshiva and learn Torah because I had a 5-year plan to go sit and learn full time, but first put out some music and make a bit of money. And now the opportunity had arisen to actually go and pursue that, to go to yeshiva. And while I was in yeshiva, that's when everything all the ducks aligned, the hashgacha protest, clicked. And suddenly, while I'm sitting in Jerusalem studying, I have a song that was getting played on a TV commercial for Microsoft all over the world. And it went on to sell, quite a few million copies. So it was a real crazy story. So my rabbi was right. I feel like I'm still riding that wave of siyata d'shemaya today. I'm still
wow,
bodyboarding through the barrels of Hashem's goodness.
First, can you share your feelings when your song "Too Close" became an international hit?
It was amazing. It was incredibly validating when "Too Close" became a big hit. It was first you really feel that sort of hug from Kodesh Baruch Hu. I felt very okay, it was worth it. Number one. And, I'm very blessed that I think a lot of people have made big sacrifices for Judaism, for Hashem, and they haven't necessarily in this world seen the benevolence and the goodness that comes from it. But in my case, I did very strongly, and it really was just a giant, cuddle. That's really what it felt like.
What ended up happening after you got dropped from the record label?
So I went to yeshiva and was not interested in going back to music. Then Hashem had other plans. Clearly, my career suddenly skyrocketed. It went a bit crazy. And from being this sort of blacklisted, outsider, suddenly every record label in the world was very interested in this guy who's not signed to a record deal, but has a, top 10 hit. So my record label called me up and they said, we're really sorry. And we have this saying in Hebrew, gamza l'tova, this is good. That gamza l'tova means that even when something seems incredibly negative, we can say this too is actually good. Even though it seems right now that it sucks, it's horrible. It's a really bad experience. But my gamza l'tova moment was this, that if I hadn't have been dropped by my record label, they'd have had to pay me basically a year's salary to make another album. And that would be it. But because they fired me and I was now, selling quite a lot of records, they had to give me a new record deal that was worth probably 3 times more than my original one. So gamza l'tova all the way. It was one of those moments of being like, oh, okay, Hashem, see what you did there. They cancelled their contract. So then they had to create a new one. So I went back to my record label, made another album, and then, then went independent after that.
So how did you balance being in the yeshiva world and yet being a super famous artist? How do you balance the two?
Firstly, not a super famous artist, but it has its challenges. But there's always challenges. That's any walk of life, you will find those challenges. There's this idea of being kaveh itim, that you have to set aside time to learn. So when you're in the Beis Midrash, it doesn't matter if someone else is calling you or you've got a bank appointment or a flight to catch. If you set time to sit and learn, like that should be your priority, because those moments of revealing the infinite are very, very precious. And even if you're leading the world life of a sort of a quasi pop star, then to sit down and learn and to set time aside even on tour was always a priority. It was always a priority. And when you're in yeshiva, to be there, to be present, and you have to be in whatever you're doing, just be present for those moments. In that moment, there's a beautiful story said by the famous Chabad Mishpir, Mendel Futterfass, that he would ask the Talmidim a question. He would say, who was the holiest Jew in the holiest time in the holiest place? And people would automatically say, Kohen Gadol, Yom Kippur, Kodesh Kedoshim. And then Mendel Futterfass would say, no. He says, the holiest Jew is you. The holiest time is right now, and the holiest place is exactly where you are. Like, to be present in that moment, that's where Hashem has put you, and that's where you're meant to be right now. So if you're there, be present. Be present in what you're doing, and understand that that's really what you have to do and where you have to be, and that's the time you're supposed to be there. So as long as a person understands that, it doesn't matter what world you're in, it's being present in whatever you're doing is so important. And what is more, that, Hasidus Chabad specifically puts a very strong emphasis on the idea that you can take something which is profane and secular and elevate it. If you can make money from a legitimate kosher source of income, and you can, have influence on the world, you can bring that back and elevate it through your Yiddishkeit, and you can have influence on that world around you just by being a Jew in that place and doing things according to, the will of God.
Is there anything you would tell your younger self about being observant that you wish you would have known then?
Chill out. That's what I would have told myself. You think you have to do everything. And yes, you do. You have to do everything, but you can't do everything all at once. So take your time and be present, and, know that the things that you can do, just do them with all your heart and be committed to those things. And the things that you can't do right now, don't stress about them, because you'll have opportunities later to do them.
What advice would you give someone who's beginning to explore their Jewish roots and go on a Jewish journey?
I would say anyone who's exploring their Jewish roots, don't forget why we do it. And that's to have a meaningful connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The nations of the world scream at us, that we're different. And, they appropriate our faith and our belief in God. And our strongest tool, to strengthen ourselves is to understand that we are connected to the creator of the universe. And our job is to fulfill that connection and to reveal that connection in the world, and always make that a priority. There are so many other beautiful details in Yiddishkeit and Judaism, which is fantastic, community, learning, intellectual pursuit, study, family life, they're all great, but it's all there for another reason, and that reason is to reveal God's presence in the world. And, that's what we're here to do. And if that is something that you can get down with and believe, and it feels that it resonates with you, then you just have to go for it. Go for it.
The Rohr Jewish Learning Institute has the largest collection of Jewish media online. Hit subscribe for more.